that it just reaffirms that we haven't come nowhere near as far as we need to. We're 150 plus years past the end of slavery, and we're just now talking about breaking the color barrier for the Supreme Court for a woman, the CEO companies and stuff like that. Those types of things have been fought for, and they continue to be fought for. And so when you talk about the relevance of the NAACP or Black Lives Matter or the ACLU or the Anti-Defamation League or any other organization that's fighting for someone's equality, until we're able to not discuss race and eliminate that, then those types of organizations are going to always be relevant. Now the method by which they get there may be different.
Our demographics of men are just now growing up, maturing to knowing how it is to being a damn American. Did I make sense?
You got to take that into account. Absolutely.
Martin is right. George Washington pleaded with America, do not create political parties, because he said, and looking around the world, the first thing they do is they start selling their votes for money.
Right.
I think too that if you look at one of the things that President Biden said back, I think Orrin Hatch said the same thing when Barack Obama first ran for president, is that he was light enough, well-spoken enough that he could probably get past the hesitation of European Americans to vote. And so I believe that's what Michonne is making reference to when he asked why he picked a light-skinned person over a darker person.
Yeah.
And
Joe Brown. No, Joe Brown. He knew Kamala really well, and he's got some. You know, she was known as sleeping her way to the top. She was really.
So what we're saying is that a person's past should determine their future.
So
someone who cruised their way through the top political. That's she's pretty well known to have done that.
So that makes it, and I'm just trying to figure this out. That makes it her fault that those men were doing whatever they did to get her to the top. I'm just trying to understand what we're saying here. It's okay for a man to sleep around and do their thing, but it's not okay for a woman. I just want to make sure that's what we're saying.
I think it's wrong for both of them. But
most politicians go in there with the idea of doing the right thing. But think about it. It's a culture and a society that has a particular energy. So once they get in there, then that energy comes on them. And then little by little, they say, you know what? Okay, I'll do a little negative over here in order to get this positive over here done. And then little by little, they get chopped at and get broken down, and they become what they end up being, which is just a politician rather than someone who's there working for the people.
So what the NAACP has said is that coming out of this last conference is that we're talking about economic stability and closing the wealth gap. And one of those things about closing the wealth gap is getting into a position for home ownership. As we know, most people's wealth is passed on through their homes. That was one of the major topics of this last convention, as well as how we get there, meaning the elimination of student debt. And what they're talking about there is that the cost of education went up 10-fold, 20-fold, but the Pell Grants and all those things that help pay for the education, those limits remain the same. And so what you did is you have this coming out of college, you have a much larger debt that it took me 15 years to pay off my student loan. So I'm not so much in favor of getting rid of them because I had to pay mine off. But they're saying that stops you from being able to get into home ownership because it's a
selfish
super
way
debt.
to look at it.
Well, yeah, it's a selfish way to look at it, but I struggled and paid mine off. And I'm not saying that, and I still own a home and I've still done all those things that
So you paved the way for the ability for other people to not have to pay theirs off. You look at it that way.
Well, I can look at it that way. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying it kind of rubs me raw that
it rubs.
Well, but that's part of the where the organization's at. So I'm there right now. We also talked about the rights of women's rights and LGBTQ rights and stuff like that. And sometimes we diverge on where we see things. That's the organization's position. So that's my position officially. Personally, I think we've given that too much play, and they've been allowed to co-opt our movement for their movement, and we've moved to the back burner, and we continue to put ourselves on the back burner for other people's causes. And so that's a Marcus Ray personal thing there. And we've also talked about where we go from here in relation to the power. And I've mentioned it before when I said that the African American, Descendants of American Slaves community, every single time that we have impacted a national election, this country's responded in the same way, right? And so we stand in the breach for voting rights and stuff like that. And I think that what we do is we ensure everybody that's legally has access to vote is able to vote without a bunch of problems. Those are the main things that come out of the conference. The one thing that they did talk about was this being the power that we have as an organization and as a community, is that when we engage in a fight, that we bring power with us for that, meaning that when we turned out for elections, certain things happen, and then when we don't turn out for elections, you have to also go with those things that happen when you don't turn out. And so this is really about the power that we possess when we show up to the polls, and then holding them accountable for the things that they said they would do when we voted for them, regardless of what party that might be. You often hear that the organization is nonpartisan, which is true, but I think we get politically involved sometimes, and we don't get anything out of being politically involved, which was to my statement earlier about the okey doke. We got politically involved, and then we got nothing out of it but a holiday. And so I digress on that. That's where the NAACP is right now.
And now I understand why you wanted to start out with the okey doke, okay? Because basically, we have a whole lot of stuff culturally that we're fed. We get emotionally tied into it, but at the end of the day, we just got fed an okey doke.
that you hit the nail on the head, my friend. And listen, I'm reminded of something that W. Du Bois said when a young guy wrote to him about why do we use the word Negro. And he said, names are only conventional signs for identifying things. If a thing is despised, either because of its ignorance or because it is despicable, you will not alter matters by changing its name. Du Bois goes on to say, and I agree, as long as the majority of men mean black and brown folks when they say Negro, so long will Negro be the name of folks black and brown. And neither anger, nor wailing, nor tears can or will change the name until the name habit changes. And so I say all that to say this: when we talk about becoming the descendant of American slaves versus Negro and black and everything else, this thing comes to my mind as we move forward and how we proceed. And so I just leave y'all with that part as we talk about why, or when Joe mentioned earlier that black is the term, or that African American is the term. And until we as a group decide it's going to be something different, then no matter how much we go on about it, it's going to stay the same until we decide it's going to be different. So we've got to work ahead of us.
It's also tied into our social emotional learning, okay, and our behavior. What you just said, if we don't change that, Martin, Peter, if we don't have the dominant European culture get out of the way and see our contribution to this country and allow us to share what we believe that we have contributed to this country, not being black, but based on being a humanity to this country as descendants of American slaves. But we got to change our social emotional attachment to color. And that color got to come from the dominant European culture, got to help us pass legislation to take it off the table. So it's a combination of both. Mark, that goes back to what you're saying. We got to learn how to work together to accomplish that, okay? But we got to be willing to listen to one another.
Here's a teaser of our next episode, World Hunger. Our guest, Martin Smith.
Russia goes into war, the fourth largest producer of grain to all of the hungriest nations. 400 million of them are now not getting that grain. If they do get it, it's going to be under high cost, because can you imagine what an insurance policy is in the middle of a war, pulling out grain out of a country as somebody's delivery? Remember, you know what that's going to do? That's going to pass on to them. And not only that, then all of a sudden, the country's going to want to pay more for it because they got more than this other country. Now we start hoarding it. Now we start moving it because, oh no, now this country don't have any and it's my country. So now I'm going to start hoarding. Then all of a sudden, now you have export hoarding. Now we have 23 countries right now that will not export food to anybody else because they're already in it right now. He said, son, you ever heard the term run for the hills? I said, yes, sir. He said, there's going to come a time when them people in them cities are going to come running to the hills. And they better not run to ours. Sitting here talking about like what I'm about to do today. I'm going to go to the West End. I'm going to go into the pavilion there at Shawnee Park, work with some young men that I'm hoping to help them learn how to butcher a hog and how to clean a chicken.